You opened the door. That is the part no one warned you about. Not the dark, not the sound, not the thing waiting on the other side. The part that undoes people, the part that has undone more people than anyone in that building will ever admit, is the moment you reach for the handle. Because something in you already knows. Something older than reason, older than language, older than the version of yourself that needs everything to make sense. That part of you knows. And you open the door anyway. You are in a narrow corridor on the second floor of a building that smells like chalk dust and damp concrete, and something else you cannot name. The lights above you are the kind that flicker just enough to make you question whether they flickered at all. Your room is at the end of the hall. It is very late. Everyone else is asleep. And from somewhere behind you, closer than the distance makes sense for, you hear a girl crying. You stop. You do not turn around. You should turn around. Her name was Mira. She had come to the city the way a lot of people do, with almost nothing in her hands and everything staked on what those hands might eventually build. She was 20 years old, the first in her family to attend a university of any real standing, and she had made a quiet promise to herself on the train ride in. No distractions, no detours, no excuses, just the work, just the future she was going to build out of sheer will and borrowed time. The campus was larger than anything she had encountered before. Old stone buildings arranged around a central courtyard, trees older than the institution itself, corridors that seemed to absorb sound rather than carry it. It was beautiful in the way that serious places often are. Not warm, exactly, but full of the particular weight that comes from decades of ambition accumulating inside the same walls. Her room was on the second floor of the women's residential wing, room 217. She had been assigned a roommate. The allotment paper listed the name Kaveri, but when she pushed open the door that first evening, the girl sitting at the study desk looked up and told her in a voice that carried no particular emotion that her name was Devika. Kaveri, she explained, had been in the room until about a week ago. Then she was not. She did not explain further. Mira put her bag down and decided not to ask. The first sign came on the third night. Mira had been doing what she always did, studying past midnight, window cracked, the city sounds filtering up from below like a kind of white noise she had already begun to find comforting. Devika was already asleep, turned toward the wall, breathing in the slow, even rhythm of someone with a clean conscience. Everything was ordinary, and then, not outside the window, not from the corridor, but from somewhere that seemed to exist just at the edge of sound itself, Mira heard footsteps. Not heavy, not dramatic, just footsteps. A measured, unhurried pace moving down the corridor outside their door and stopping, she was almost certain, directly in front of room 217. She sat very still. The footsteps did not continue. No one knocked. No one tried to handle. After 30 seconds, maybe 40, she heard the footsteps again, retreating now, growing faint, then gone. She told herself it was another resident. Late return, wrong floor maybe. She closed her notes. She went to sleep. The second sign came 2 nights later and was harder to explain away. She had woken at some hour past 2, the room very dark, Devika's breathing still steady across from her, and she became aware, slowly, the way you become aware of something you do not want to be aware of, that someone was standing just outside their door. Not knocking, not speaking, just standing. She could hear the faint change in the quality of the silence that a human presence creates, the subtle compression of air, the sense of weight and breath and intention on the other side of a barrier that now felt very thin. And then she heard it, a sound like weeping. Quiet, controlled. Not the weeping of someone who wants to be heard, but the weeping of someone who no longer expects anyone to come.
She did not open the door that night. She lay completely still, blanket pulled to her chin, and she listened to that sound until it stopped. It stopped not gradually, not with the organic diminishing of someone moving away. It stopped the way a recording stops, all at once, clean, final. In the morning, she went to breakfast with a group of students she had met in her first week. A small group, engineering second years, the kind of people who had been there long enough to have opinions about the campus they were not fully willing to explain. She mentioned carefully that she had heard something in the corridor outside her room, a girl crying late at night. The table went quiet in a way that was very different from ordinary quiet. Then one of them said her name, the name she had not meant to say but somehow said anyway, Kaveri, and the quiet got worse. They looked at each other, that specific look, the one that means we know something and we are not going to be the one to tell you. Finally, one of them said very quietly, "Do not keep asking about that name. There is a history with that name here. There are things that happened in this building that the administration has spent a great deal of effort making sure no one talks about formally. And informally," she paused, "informally, no one talks about it either. Not because there is nothing to say, because they have seen what happens to the people who say too much." Mira walked back to her room that afternoon carrying that sentence like a stone in her chest. That evening, she asked Devika. They were both at their desks, the room lit by the yellow light of their study lamps, the campus outside quiet and dark. Mira asked, as neutrally as she could manage, who Kaveri was, what had happened to her, why people reacted to her name the way they did. Devika did not answer immediately. She set down her pen. She looked at the wall in front of her for a long moment, not thinking, Mira realized, but deciding. Then she said, "There are things that happened in this building that go back further than Kaveri. Kaveri was not the beginning. She was just the most recent. There was a faculty member. She did not use his name, and Mira did not ask for it, who had been on staff for years, respected, well regarded, the kind of man who gives the right speech at the right ceremony, the kind of man whose name appears in the right places. And there were girls, across years, across rooms, who had understood, slowly, what his attention meant, what it cost." Devika stopped. She turned and looked at Mira directly for the first time in this conversation. She said, "I am one of them." She told Mira what had happened. She spoke in a voice drained of everything except the words themselves. No anger, no grief, just the flat and terrible clarity of something you have processed until it has lost its ability to surprise you. He had come to her room late. She had refused him, had fought free of him, had run to the corridor, to other doors, knocking until her hands hurt, while nothing opened, while the floor stayed empty and silent around her. She had made it out, she had survived, and eventually, through formal channels, through confessions, through the quiet courage of women comparing notes in low voices, that man had been removed, charged, imprisoned. She said, I did not have to do anything more. The world, for once, did what it was supposed to do. But then, she said, Kaveri came. Mira did not understand at first. She said, what about Kaveri? What does any of this have to do with Kaveri? And Devika said, Kaveri was also his, and Kaveri did not survive. The room was very still. Devika said, by the time he was finished with her, she was standing on the roof of this building, and then she was not standing anymore. Mira did not speak. Devika said, that is why her name does not get spoken here. Not because she was dangerous, not because she was difficult, because she was 22 years old, and she came to this campus to build something, and instead something was taken from her that she could not recover, and then everything else was taken too. And the only thing the people in this building know how to do with a grief that large is make it into something they do not have to look at directly. A ghost is easier than the truth. A ghost does not require you to ask what you did or did not do.
3 days after that conversation, Mira was called to the administration office. The registrar informed her, with minimal expression, that there had been an error in her room assignment. She had been placed in 217 in error. The room had a history. He did not elaborate on what history, and it had been flagged for reassignment. He told her she would be moving. She asked where Devika would be moved to. He looked up from the paper in front of him. He said, there is no Devika assigned to that room. There has been no one in that room with you since the 2nd week of term. Mira heard the words clearly. She processed them in order, and then she said, I have spoken with her every day for nearly 2 weeks. The registrar looked at her the way people look when they are doing careful arithmetic with something they do not want the answer to. He set down his pen. He said quietly, another student came to this office a month ago. She had been in 217. She described the same experience. A roommate who appeared on the 2nd day. A girl who was present, consistent, detailed, real. That student was taken home by her family. She was not doing well. Mira sat in that chair and felt the floor become uncertain beneath her. She thought of Devika's voice, measured, warm, carrying something that had always registered to her as lived experience. She thought of the lamp on Devika's desk, the books arranged on the shelf, the sound of her breathing in the dark.